In Catullus 22, he addresses his friend Varus, whom we've met before, but he's going to be talking about this guy named Stephanus. So we have our vocative, of course, and then Stephanus is going to serve as our subject. This word iste describes Stephanus, and it's kind of equivalent to ille, but it often has more of a negative connotation to it, so a little more pejorative, if you will. So he says Varus, that's Stephanus, and then we have a little relative clause where the quem is not going to go back to Varus. That wouldn't really make sense. It's going to go all the way back to Stephanus. So that guy Stephanus, whom, and then nosti is the same as novisti. So subject being isti you, and then you knew, so whom you knew, and this is just a little adverb. Then we have our main verb. So Stephanus is a venustus et dicux et urbanus, and those are all going to describe this down homo. So little maybe mini polysyndeton here because of the two ands, but describing him as a sophisticated guy. All right, and then we have our que, which is going to jump in front, and idem, which is a word we haven't seen recently, means the same. So the same man, referring to Stephanus. Facit makes plurimos versus. So versus meaning verses. So he's a poet, maybe like Catullus. And this longe means longly, literally. It's an adverb. All right, now we get some personal perspective. We have our verb puto. Ego is the subject. I think, of course, that's going to introduce an indirect statement. This is a little bit weird looking, so follow me here. So I think that milia out decum out plura. So these are all substantives, and they're all kind of numbers, and they're going to act as the subjects of our indirect statements. So he says, I think that thousands or tens or more, and then supply something like verses. And then our verb, this is weird, is going to be prescripta esse up here. So we're going to put all that together. So I think that thousands or 10 or more verses were written. And then this is going to be a dative of agent, so you just translated this by. So by that guy. Alrighty. And then we've got nec meaning not, and then the seek ut fit, all of this together means as usual. So not as usual on palimpsesto. So this is kind of like your ordinary paper. So kind of think of it as like your notebook paper if you're just kind of jotting stuff down. So he doesn't write on the palimpsesto, but he's going to have this huge list describing what his writing looks like. So, and then we have a relata and supply an essay with that, maybe like this one up here. So I think that it is relata, or it has been, supply your essay, oops, literally carried back, not as usual on palimpsesto. And then right here, I'm running out of space, you're going to supply the word said, which of course means but. But instead, he's got a cartae regii, and use your book to help you with your vocabulary here. These are essentially just a list of nominative things. So cartae regii, novi libri, novi umbilici, and then Laura rumbra membranae. This one is actually genitive, so you say like of for this. And then directa plumbo et pumice omnia aequata. So again, these are kind of describing this book. So directa, if you use your text here, it says like having been marked with plumbo, and then pumice, if you remember this from the first Catullus poem. So all things having been, this is a perfect passive participle. Likewise, it's directa. So those are framing the line. All things having been kind of finished off, made even with the pumice stone. So remember that the pumice stone is there to kind of finish things off, smooth things out. And that does create a chiasmus. Look at that. Alrighty. So basically, in these 3 lines, we find out that his book is beautiful. Alrighty. So then he's got a cum clause here. So we're going to translate this as when. So when you, possibly referring back to Varus, when you read hike these things, so the things that Stephanus has written, that bellus et urbana Stephanus. So all of this, I'm just going to put this together, is going to describe Stephanus. So beautiful and sophisticated, so Stephanus. And then we jumped here to videator. Remember that when the verb to see is in the passive, it means seem. So he seems. Maybe supply something like to be. And unus caprimulgus. And check that word out in your book. That's going to mean an ordinary ditch digger. Or a country bumpkin. Oh, this is your ditch digger, fossor. So a ditch digger or a country bumpkin. So what we're learning here is that his writing is not very high quality. So Stephanus the man is awesome and sophisticated and intelligent, but when you read his writing, it is not so good. So he finishes this line here and he says, aborit ac mutat. And then this word tanta means so much. So he is so much different and changed from that sophisticated guy. In the second half, he starts off with a rhetorical question. He says, what? And then our verb is putamus, which is a subjunctive. So we've changed that A from our first conjugation to an E. This is going to be called a deliberative subjunctive. And so that's where you're deliberating. You're thinking about, it's deliberative. So you're thinking about things. So we're going to translate it as should. So what should we think that this indirect statement essay is? And so that's referring to Stephanus as a person versus as a writer. And so the quiz can refer back to Stephanus. So he who, just now, a witty person, or if, and then quid, when it follows the C, is going to be translated as any. And since it's neuter, we'll say anything. So if anything seemed skitious, this is a comparative adjective. And then hoc re is going to be an ablative of comparison. Alrighty. So idem here is going to mean the same man, so being Stephanus, is, and then infacetior is going to be our adjective, and this is also comparative. So is more boorish or not witty, and then we've got these two words going together, and this is going to be another ablative of comparison, so translated as than, and it uses that same word again, so of course that creates a polyptoton. All right, so he's pretty critical of him here. Next, we've got simul, which means as soon as he, being Stephanus, touches poetry. Neque idem umquam aeque est. So the same man is not ever equally as happy. So I would supply like an as. So when he touches poetry, he is not ever equally as happy as when he is writing poems. So even though he's really bad at it, it really makes him happy. And which we see here in this line. So he rejoices so much in himself. And Tom, so an anaphora, he himself, ipse, wonders, admires himself, Tom again, so much. So he really likes his writing. All right. And then this is going to give us, this last few lines kind of give us a moral of the story. So we have this word idem again. Notice that he has used this several times. So 1, 2, 3, at least in the second half. And so it's going to mean the same or likewise. And we are switching our subject here. So look at your verb. The mer tells us that your subject is we. So we all. Likewise. And then this will mean like without a doubt. Something to that effect. And then following more. This means we are deceived. So we likewise all are deceived. And so then he says, there is not anyone, that's our subject, est is our verb, whom, so this is our direct object referring back to the quisquam. So I'll just draw my arrow like this, and then there you go. So there is not anyone whom, direct object, jump all the way down here, that makes for a nice enjambment. So whom you are not able to see a Stephanus. So now instead of, it's not that I am Stephanus, it's that we all have some kind of Stephanus in us. So whom you are not able to see, infinitive, a Stephanus in some way. And then we've got error as our subject here. That can mean error. Can mean a couple other things. So look in your book and decide which one you like. And then suis is going to go with that. So suis is a reflexive pronoun. So his own, her own, its own, their own. So kind of referring back to this quisquam. So anyone's own error. Tributus est is attributed to him. But so we all have flaws essentially, but we do not see. And then you're supposed to supply something like the part. So the part of the backpack. So I'll put a little part in there for you. It's our direct object. So we do not see the part of the backpack which, so referring, I guess, back to the part, which is on our back. So that means that we don't see our flaws because they're kind of on your back. So if you think about not being able to see behind you, you can't see if there's a flaw there. So look at the questions and see if you can kind of figure out the big meaning here. I kind of touched on it. Good luck.